So what's it really like to be an expat here in Italy? Well, you've only got to look at some of the videos here on this channel to understand my personal perspective of life as an expat here in South Italy. And you've only got to look on YouTube at many of the other content creators that you can find who are living in Italy and also documenting their experiences. However, I do understand that sometimes you, if you're really serious, especially about moving to Italy, might want to have more of a mass opinion of what people really think about living in Italy, rather than it being like one person versus another. So I thought it would be really interesting in today's episode to analyse the findings from InterNations Expat Insider Survey of 2023 and talk about them with you, because they cover most of the key areas that you'll encounter as an expat living in Italy. And I'm going to share with you kind of my perspective on the findings and kind of my own experiences as well. Now, just as a disclaimer, this video is not sponsored by InterNations, but they are a fantastic expat community. In fact, they are the world's largest expat community with over 4 million members. And this Expat Insider Survey is currently in its 10th edition. In fact, the 2024 survey is yet to be published, which is why we are working with the one from last year. Now, in this survey, they typically ask over 12,000 expats for their opinions and experiences who are living in 53 different countries around the world. And in today's episode, we're going to deep dive into the opinions of expats here in Italy, both their profile and also what they think about when it comes to things like working conditions, finances, and quality of life. So with all that said and done, let's get into the video. So let's begin by taking a look at the profile of a typical expat living here in Italy, according to this survey. Now, the average age of an expat here in Italy is 44.7 years old. Now, I would say that this sits about right, because I know plenty of expats who moved here in their 20s. I myself was 34 years old, and I also know people who moved here when they were like a lot later in life, like ready to retire here. So I feel like this average age is correct because it sits nicely in the middle and kind of encompasses kind of every aspect either side, really. Now, when it comes to the gender split, this is interesting because 40% of expats here in Italy are male, followed by 59% who are female and 1% who self-describe. Now, this statistic is interesting because it's actually the reverse of the audience that I have here on this YouTube channel. So on this YouTube channel in the last 28 days, 60.8% of my audience were male, followed by 39.2% who were female. So it's kind of the reverse, really. But yeah, I must admit, I don't really notice this kind of gender split once I'm living here. Like, I meet both male and female expats and have done over the course of my time here in Italy, and I've never really felt like it leans more towards one than the other. But there we have it. There are officially more female expats here in Italy than male, which is interesting. Now, if we have a little look at the top nationalities, 13% of expats here in Italy are US American, 12% are British, and 5% are Indian. So these are some interesting statistics, and these correlate better with my YouTube channel actually, because currently in the last 28 days, 33.8% of my audience has been from the United States, 12.1% from Italy, which is surprising because my content is not geared towards an Italian audience, but I know a lot of you follow me to practice your English, so good for you if that's you, keep going. And also 8.9% of my audience are from the UK. So this split is more representative of the top nationalities that we have here in Italy. I do think that, of course, post-Brexit, it is more complicated now for people from the UK to move to Italy. So I do think that that number will either stagnate or maybe decrease as the years go on, I would suggest, unless there is the room for visas or something similar for people to come here. Now, when it comes to the top reasons for moving to Italy, 21% said to go to school or university. Now, this surprised me a little bit because it's not easy to study in another country, in another language. However, on the other hand, it's also your ticket to move to Italy because you have a student visa, And also there are some top universities here in this country, and depending on the profession that you want to get into, you could very well benefit from studying here in Italy itself. Not to mention, of course, it's a fantastic experience to live abroad and to study and meet new people. Now, 16% of people who live here gave the reason for love. I love this so much, love, because a lot of people will say to me, why did you move to Italy? Was it for love? Like, I swear, it's the number one question that people ask me after they've asked me why the hell did I leave London. And it's interesting because I didn't move here for love. Love came later. But I think for a lot of people, this is their reason. And you can see this is why it's quite high up on the list. But it is interesting that people have this assumption here that if you decide to move to Italy, it can't possibly be because you like the country, it's got to be because you're in love with someone. Isn't it funny? And then 7% of expats moved here to have a better quality of life. Now, I kind of feel that I fall into this bracket because whether it was a little bit naive of me to think so or not, I actually came to Italy to rediscover my joy and to kind of find myself again, because I felt like I'd lost myself with the life that I was living back in London. And it was very interesting for me because I also lost myself here in Italy, but then I found myself again. So I kind of feel that overall my life maybe in some respects is a lot better here in Italy than it was back in London. But it's interesting that that is the lowest reason, and I feel like it's because people know the reality more now of what life is like here in Italy. There are a lot of people that still paint this romantic image of life here, but there are more and more people, myself included, who are also showing the other side, and I think people are just becoming a little better educated now as to their real reasons and motives for moving to Italy. Now, when it comes to employment sectors, the one area that I really want to talk about is the top area. 14% of expats work in the education sector. Now, this does not surprise me at all. As I have said in many other videos, this is considered to be the easier, in inverted commas, option for finding work here in Italy. There is a demand for English teachers here. There are plenty of schools who are constantly looking for teachers to fill vacancy gaps. So for this, I can understand why expats would choose this as their initial career. Now, as I've spoken about in many other videos, I don't think everybody can be a teacher. I think teaching comes from your heart and not your head. You have to have passion for what you do, because otherwise you will just come across as robotic and somebody who doesn't really care about anything but the paycheck. So I do think that you have to have passion, and that emanates from you. You cannot fake passion. So for this, I think if you're doing this just to set your life up here, okay, but you have to find some kind of passion for your role, because to be a teacher is a great responsibility and not many people really appreciate that or really take it seriously enough. So just a bit of an aside note, but essentially it's not a surprise for me that education would be the top area for expats to work within. So let's take a look then at how these expats rate life in Italy. Now, let's begin with the glaringly obvious, rather dismal overall ranking of life in Italy as being 47th out of 53. Well and truly in the bottom 10 for the way of life here in Italy. Doesn't surprise me when we talk about these individual aspects. I think it will become very clear to you as to why Italy ranks so badly in this aspect. But what I did find interesting was the happiness level, which seems to be at odds with this particular statistic, because if you have a look, 71% of expats here in Italy are happy, compared to 72% of expats globally. And so when you look at that statistic, you have a country that you're living in that ranks in the bottom 10 for kind of the way of life and everything that is part of that, yet 71% of expats are happy. I feel like that kind of tells you everything you need to know about Italy. This is the paradox of life here in Italy. It is these two extremes. I've said it from the very beginning, and these statistics are presented it straight to you to see for yourself. Like, I think the thing with Italy is this: if you move here and you're very headstrong and you come here with a certain set of values and principles that you've kind of held on to all your life, you're used to a particular way of living, a particular set of standards, and you're not willing to budge or move on that or learn to adapt, you are going to become very miserable here very, very quickly. The key to happiness here in Italy is acceptance. Also accepting what you can control and what you cannot control, most importantly. Like, for example, I can control the way that people treat me, in the sense that I can set up my boundaries and I can teach people how to treat me. I cannot control the way other people behave, absolutely not, but I can control their impact on me, because that's within my control. I'm always in control of my thoughts and feelings and the way that I perceive situations to be. I cannot control the cleanliness of an entire city, but I can control my own personal ability to keep a city clean, learning to use the rubbish bin, being tidy when I'm outdoors. That can be my own personal contribution. Like, I cannot control a creaking bureaucratic system that cannot cope with everyday life, but I can control the part I play in it and make sure that I perceive my role in a more positive way, and that I do everything that I need to do and try to view things from a different perspective to keep myself calm in what can be an incredibly testing experience when you deal with the bureaucracy here. So you see, it's about acceptance, accepting what you can do and accepting what you cannot do, and just learning to be okay with that. I think really this is the key to finding your happiness here. And then of course, once you're in that space, you can really appreciate where you live, because Italy is a beautiful country despite all of its flaws. So I think that is the true key to happiness here. Let's start to have a look at these different categories, shall we, within the survey. Let's begin with Quality of Life Index. Here we are pretty average as a country, Italy, 33 out of 53 countries. Now, some key things to note here are when it comes to the leisure options. Italy actually ranks pretty high in this category, 17th out of 53 countries. Now, within this category, 80% of expats were happy with the culinary variety and dining options available to them, versus 77% globally. So that's interesting, and it's not surprising, because Italy is like the home of food. You will eat some of the best food you've ever eaten in your life here in Italy. Also, 72% of expats rate the culture and nightlife favourably, versus 68% globally. So again, there is a lot to see and do here in Italy. In my opinion, you will always find something to do, even if that means you travel out of the town or city that you're in, if needs be. You will always find something to do. And especially here in the south of Italy, there is definitely a culture during the summer months of living outdoors and spending a lot of time in the evenings outside with friends, having a drink, having something to eat. It's that kind of culture. So yeah, I can understand why nightlife and culture itself are rated quite favourably amongst expats. Now, taking a little look at the environment and climate subcategory, shall we say, here it ranked 34, which is average, but there are some things to consider, because 76% of expats enjoy the weather and climate, versus 77% globally. I agree with this, because the weather here is wonderful. I come from London, where it is permanently grey and people like lose their minds when the sun comes out. So for me to live in a place where there is pretty much year-round sunshine and just a lovely ambient temperature makes me very happy indeed. The hot weather is a bit more difficult for me to cope with, but I'd rather that than grey skies any day of the week. What is interesting though is when it comes to air quality, 30% of expats are unhappy with air quality, versus 17% globally. Italy is a polluted country, especially in the big built-up cities. Pollution levels are high, and this does impact the air quality. Even here in Palermo, I would say the air quality is low. Also as well, consider that if we have any fires, which can happen, especially here in Palermo when the temperatures are very high, this also adds to a rather toxic air quality. So it's a shame, because Italy is a beautiful, beautiful country, but unfortunately it is affected by rather high levels of pollution in some parts. Now, if we take a look at the next category, Ease of Settling In Index. Now, this is fairly good, 28 out of 53. It's probably the best performing category out of all of them, and I would say that This is good. But I would say to set your expectations straight, because yes, people are friendly here, especially in the south. Yes, you can find friends here, but it's not necessarily easy. You do have to be realistic and kind of get yourself involved in the community if you really want to meet people, unless you have the option to meet people through your study or through work. And then when it comes to the culture and initial welcome, this was the thing that I think I struggled with the most when I first moved here, because the Italian culture is worlds apart from the British culture in many different ways. And I think some of my biggest stumbling blocks were surrounding culture, and also in a way like finding friends at the very beginning. And so I think, you know, you have to come here with a certain expectation when it comes to learning about a country's culture and taking it back to acceptance, accepting things for the way that they are here, and trying to be a bit more flexible and as to the way of life here. I think all of these things contribute to you having a much better experience. But overall, this category fared pretty well compared to the others. Now, let's talk about working abroad, shall we? Oh, goodness me. 52 out of 53, pretty much at the bottom. This is so interesting because I couldn't agree more with the results from the survey in this category. So, taking it into some of the subcategories, when we're talking about career prospects, nearly half of the expats surveyed were unhappy with the local job market. So this is 47% of expats versus 26% globally. Now, there's something to know about the job market here in Italy. It is complicated, it is flawed. Even Italian people struggle to really get a grip and a step on their career ladder, and many choose to leave Italy completely to set their life up elsewhere. So it isn't easy for a native Italian, let alone an expat. So career prospects are, in my opinion, very much dependent on where you are in Italy. In South Italy, the prospects start to become lower and lower and lower. In the north of Italy, they tend to be a little bit higher, maybe not by very much, but certainly there is more of an emphasis on progression, perhaps in the north of Italy, than there is here in the south. So I thought that was quite interesting. And it's interesting because 33% of expats say that moving to Italy hasn't improved their career prospects versus 18% globally. And I just think it's for the reasons that I've just mentioned. Like, the working culture here is something else. It's very traditional, it's very behind with the times in a lot of ways. And this naturally impacts the progression that you can really make in your career, depending on what it is. Now, when it comes to job security, this I thought was really interesting because 26% of expats surveyed were unhappy with their job security here in Italy, compared to 19% globally. I think a lot of this has to do with the contracts that are given with different jobs here in Italy. Here in Italy, to have like an indeterminato contract, which means it doesn't expire, well, you are considered to be extremely blessed and fortunate if you are in that category, because the majority of people here are issued with determinato contracts, which means they are fixed term. They are only for a short period of time. Now, there is a law that stipulates that a company can only continue to give you determinato contracts up to a certain point, and then if they want to continue employing you, they need to switch you to an indeterminato. But still, I had a determinato contract when I first moved to Italy and I worked at a school. This is common practice for schools to begin with a determinato contract. And I remember feeling like I was happy I had the contract, but I remember feeling really insecure when it was coming to the end of the school year, because I was like, what if this doesn't get renewed? I have to go and find another job. Now, it did get renewed and I was super blessed because it got renewed automatically into an indeterminato contract, which doesn't normally happen that way. So I was very blessed, but I know that many other teachers who worked at that particular school waited maybe 2 years before they were given this indeterminato. So I saw how blessed I was, really. But it does make you feel insecure when you don't have a contract that really protects you in the same way that an indeterminato contract does here in Italy. So I think in a way that kind of adds to job security as well. Now, when it comes to work and leisure within this category, Italy ranks in the bottom 10 for working hours, and coming at 46th position, and for work-life balance ranks 44th. Now, this makes me laugh because the amount of Italians that will tell me that when you work here in Italy, you have to sell your soul, it's unbelievable. Employers expect the world from you and then some, and they expect you to bow to their commands and to be available at the drop of a hat. And it's kind of an unrealistic expectation that is placed on a lot of people here. And I think it's really interesting that, you know, people would find that they don't really have this work-life balance, because it is a bit of a fairy tale that people have of life in Italy. People have this notion that Italian people kind of like laze around on the sofa all day with a glass of spritz, like, you know, just living la dolce vita, but it's not true. Although Italian people do know when to rest, there is a very strong work ethic here, and I've always spoken about this. In fact, if you want to dive a bit deeper into the working culture here, watch this video up here next. I reveal everything. So I can understand why, and working hours the same. It's a shame, but unfortunately a lot of people work very long hours here and work pretty much all week, and even sometimes on a Sunday morning. So there is a very strong work ethic here, a very strong working culture. Now, when it comes to the category of work culture and satisfaction, it was interesting because 39% of expats here in Italy said that the local business culture doesn't support creativity. Now, this was versus a global percentage of 26%. Flexibility, well, expats believed that local business doesn't support flexibility. 33% of them felt this way versus 18% globally. And then also when it came to independent work, 43% of expats here in Italy believed that the local business culture doesn't support independent work, compared to 26% of expats globally. So it is a strange culture here when it comes to work, I'm telling you. I've been so open about this with you in so many videos. You do have to change your mindset if you decide you want to work here. It's unlike any other country you've worked in and probably will ever work in your life. So you do have to get used to the way of life here, especially in the South. It's like going back 20 years. So you do need to prepare yourself. But the kind of not so surprising overall job satisfaction ranks last worldwide at 53rd. I can't say I didn't see that coming, really. Like, it's not easy to work here, and it's not easy to kind of have that satisfaction here, because employers don't appreciate their staff here and they don't really know how to be good managers. So it's very difficult sometimes to feel satisfied with your work, for sure. Let's talk about the Expat Essentials Index. So again, super low ranking, 51 out of 53 countries. And this, of course, is where we find the biggest nightmare that you'll ever face as an expat here in Italy: bureaucracy. Now, when it comes to bureaucracy, 72% of expats find bureaucracy in Italy difficult, compared to 38% globally. Expats find it difficult to open a bank account here. 33% were unhappy versus 22% globally. And in order to get a visa to move to Italy, 39% of expats were unhappy with this process versus 24% globally. Now, it's safe to say bureaucracy is your biggest nightmare. Watch this video if you want me to try to help you, give you some tips as to how to manage this situation. But oh my God, it's the biggest headache you'll encounter for sure. So I completely understand why this ranks so badly within this category. Now, when it comes to digital life subcategory, 42% of expats were unhappy with the lack of government services online versus 21% globally. Now, I agree with this, because for me, it's incredible that you have to do so much of your bureaucracy and administration in presence in offices. There is so much that you cannot do online, or if there is an online presence, it doesn't function. Like when I first moved here to Palermo from Salerno, I was amazed. I was like, wow, I have this online portal. This is fantastic, because Salerno didn't have this. You had to go in presence to the residency office. Well, I got myself a bit too excited because it didn't work properly, and I ended up having to wait 6 months for my residency to be changed. So this is what I mean. We have the mindset of trying to be in 2024 with the technology and the reality back in like the 1980s. It's incredible. And like, it was very frustrating for me dealing with that. And then just recently, trying to get an appointment at the rubbish tax office, the TARI. Those of you who follow me on Instagram, you'll know this answer already because loads of you commented. But essentially, the next available in-presence appointment at the rubbish tax office, if you try to book online, June 2025. Yes, my friends, you heard that right. Get ready. That's all I can say to you. Get ready if you plan to move to Italy. Mamma mia, it's the biggest mess I think I've ever experienced. Right, when it comes to language within this category, 57% of expats said it's difficult to live in Italy without speaking the language. Hands up, I'm there, I'm telling you, this is true. I've managed to survive, God knows how. I think I'm just very blessed, but also because I'm a very strong-minded person as well. But of course, speaking the language will change your experience here for the better. So you definitely need to do it. Not many people here speak English. You're going to find life very difficult, unnecessarily so, if you are not able to communicate. So definitely heed that advice. However, I will say, it said here 52% of expats found the Italian language easy to learn compared to 40% globally. Now, I kind of think this is very subjective because every person learns a language differently. It's not kind of right to say, well, this person learned a language faster than you, there's something wrong with you, you should be learning it quicker. It's not like that. We are all individuals. We all have different lives. We all have different learning styles. It's not possible that you can learn the language in the same amount of time as another person. So I kind of find this statistic maybe a little bit misleading. Italian is not necessarily an easy language to learn. It depends on what your native tongue is, to be honest. And it also depends on how much effort you're willing to put into learning the language too. But this is what the statistics say. Now let's have a look at the last aspect, personal finance. Now again, pretty low ranking for this as well. Italy actually ranks above average for the cost of living, in 25th out of 53, which is good, but I feel this will change for this year because the price of everything has gone up. However, 33% of the expats are unhappy with their financial situation here versus 22% globally. I feel like a lot of that is based on the low salaries here and the lack of prospects here that you really find when you start living here, because 34% of expats describe their household income as not enough to live comfortably on compared to 27% globally. So, I mean, there you have it. You have this extreme here, like you can find a job here and okay, fair enough, you can get by, but you're not necessarily going to be living the high life depending on what your career is. I mean, the average national salary is 1,200 euros a month. If you're living on your own and you have a house to pay and bills to pay, that money very quickly disappears. So, you know, you have to really look at this and be honest with yourself and be like, can I sustain myself financially? Because living in Italy, unless you've got other interests or you're able to have some other kind of side hustles, it's very difficult to kind of become financially free here because of all the restrictions that are placed on you through kind of low salaries and taxes and things like this, really. So it is interesting, and I actually think this entire survey has been interesting. I will link below to the entire survey so you can go through it in more detail, because I really think if you're planning to move to Italy, this is the kind of research you need to do. Like, you need to know for yourself what you're letting yourself in for, and you know I always tell it to you straight with lots of love because I want you to make a go of your life here, but this is the kind of thing you need to be doing if you really, really want to make something of yourself here in Italy. After this mammoth 30-minute video, maybe one of my longest to date, I will see you in the next episode.